Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's have a quick look at what we did in the last episode. I think I'm just going to refer to it as an episode now because pretty much the Blender part can be seen as a chapter. And then once we get to the texturing, this is also its own chapter. And then at the very end, we also have a making renders chapter. And with that, we have now completed the 4th episode. And we are well on our way here to block out the lower receiver. And we had to take it really slowly. And by that, I mean we're not having too much details in there yet. This is just the natural process when we approach a complex object like this receiver. And I must say that the lower receiver is not as complex as the upper receiver because on the upper we have so many different parts that are extending out. And in the following episode, episode 5, we're gonna have to make sure that we block out already the upper receiver as far as all these different objects are concerned. We're essentially just gonna stick them into each other and flush them out a little bit. This is gonna be a pure block out episode that follows, and we also have to jump around a lot between our reference images. We sometimes have to pull the one reference further down so that we have a better view on a certain element. Then we have to rotate over to the back view and have to also adjust the reference. So be prepared that this is what follows, but that is just an essential step as we are working on these receivers. And now we are also gonna already approach the upper receiver. So that might be a little bit a case of having to take it slowly as everything, but in particular, the next episode, I would recommend to really just watch and listen what I'm doing. And then maybe even if you feel like you missed a step, make sure to just play it slowly. Because all the actions are there. You see what I did in the corner right. And also I'm explaining as we do that. So that is going to be the next episode. More work on the lower and the upper receiver. And once we have this all blocked out, it's going to be a bit more convenient for us to work on, because essentially then we already have the shapes in place. And then we can put more focus onto the refinement of everything. And we don't have to switch around the views as much as in that episode that is now coming. So I hope that you're still doing good so far. And with that said, let's continue. So we are back working on our lower receiver. And we're gonna take a quick look here at these elements that are a part of this trigger guard mount, where the trigger guard goes into. And we're going to continue working on that here. This needs to be brought out a bit further. I'm going to put it to 10 on the x-axis actually, just so that we have a fixed number in there. And that also seems to be what I see there on the reference. So let's put the focus here on this part where we left it off. I take this edge over here and put it down a bit. We want that to be here one continuous straight line pretty much. And then I'm going to give that a bevel. Let's see how many segments, and 5 should be okay. And this one I'm going to also position a little bit better here. Before then also making a bevel, but this one only requires like 2 segments. And then we can add some extra subdivisions in there strategically and just reposition that a bit better here. I want to add another edge here too. just to make that more round. We don't want that to look like there's an obvious edge. It needs to be round. And let's fill that here. And then on that side, we have the same work to do. I'm going to bring that down a bit here. Reposition that. Go over to edge mode and also add an edge there in the center. And then we can give this one here a bevel. Remember, we have the mirror modifier on, so it translates over to the other side. So this one here, one segment is enough in that case. And then here at the top, we require a bit more again. So let's put that to 3 segments. And that one here, we might just make use of that already existing edge and just give it 1 bevel with 1 segment. And now this is a little bit close by each other here. I'm going to go to vertex and even that out further. So let's take a look here at that part where the pistol grip is wrapped around. And let's just delete these faces because I want to take it up until here, make an extrusion and then SX0 so that we have these edges actually coming out there all together like that next to each other. I'm gonna merge by distance. And then let's take these 2 edges. Oh, let me undo that. These 2 edges and let's connect it in the center. So now we can select these edges up here until that point. And then we just need to align it. So let's then take these faces that we just created here and let's extrude them down, similar to what we did earlier there for the trigger guard mount. So let's take the mirror off because that added some faces that we don't want and we can just delete them. And now we want to clean that up here a bit because we have a lot of edges that we actually don't need at the moment. So we're going to dissolve it. And that makes it easier here to work with. Let's go to X-ray and select these vertex points and let's align them on the Z-axis. Let's position that. And this one here is coming straight down. And now we can clean up here our edges that we don't need. Let's also get rid of these here. Dissolve, and then we can make a connection over here with these vertex points over to that side. Super smart create on these here too to make that connection. And now let's just flatten that here. S, Y, and 0. We bring that vertex up. And then let's just make a few connections here. This one should be connected like that. And this one here like this. And then we can dissolve this edge. Let's put the mirror modifier back on. And let's take a look at our reference. I was able to find out 61.5 and 26 millimeter for these coordinates there. Let's go to object mode and we're gonna start with a box of 26 millimeters. And then on the Y, we put it to 61.5. So now we can position that here into the magazine well. Let's center this. So this is important for us to essentially use as a reference here to know where these edges are supposed to go. I had a small production hiccup here where I had to re-record this part here that we're currently watching. I'm going to connect it like that. And now the old recording continues. Just connect it like this. And let's continue on the other side doing the same. Now we can dissolve these edges. And on that side, the same thing. So we're optimizing a bit here. And as far as this edge here is concerned, or these edges, let's dissolve only these three here. But we want to keep that edge here in place for the moment. And now let's go over here and dissolve that. And we can then take this edge from here to there and fill it. So now what we can then do is extrude up in a moment. But first, let's take these edges and in X-ray, let's drag that up here on our Z-axis. So before we do any beveling, like I mentioned before, we are really conservative about what we do. And we just want to make sure we have that basic shape as good as it can be before the refinement. Gonna take these vertex points and bring it a bit further down here. If I rotate the camera, you see that we have these vertex points there in the back, and we just want to make sure it's aligned there at the edge on the bottom. So now it's actually time to give this a bit of a refinement here, at least for these edges. So let's select these and also the ones here at the next step. And we're gonna give it a bevel now, but first let's position it a bit further down. So we go to the orthographic view here, the side view, and let's give that around 2 segments here. And now let's do the same thing here around these edges. So in that case, let's see how many segments. These are 2 segments, and maybe we require a bit more. You can see these steps there, so it looks better here with 3 segments. We're gonna further clean that up. And let's start here by connecting that. We can use our vertex slide. By connecting, I mean actually making it straight. The bevel was kind of messing it up, so let's just position these vertex points back so that they are aligned. And let's dissolve these edges. And before we make that connection, I just want to make sure that this is all welded together properly. So I'm going to use our F2 plugin, and that ensures that all sides are properly welded. We could have also just merged everything, but just to remind you that we have this plugin as well that we can use from time to time. So let's continue. We put the mirror on, collapse it, and then let's select this Boolean operator followed by the receiver, and let's make a difference operation here. So later we're going to, of course, open it up at the front. But for now, while this is work in progress, let's just leave it around here, somewhere in the center. And now let's apply this Boolean, which collapses also our mirror modifier stack. So let's connect these vertex points, which somehow didn't work here using the super smart create. So instead, let's connect these edges here, and then we can connect it down on both sides. Now let's go over here to our back orthographic view. And as before, let's just delete the right side. And let me put the mirror back on. Previously, we had that collapsed. So now we have the mirror back on. And now let's take a look here at this section, which we are going to do with the Boolean. Let's put that to a 16 millimeters. And that looks like it's actually matching quite well here. I'm gonna add another edge there in the center for the whole loop. And let's go over here to our snap. And let's just snap that so that this is perfectly aligned here like that, okay? So now we can go to vertex and just drag that all the way over here. So make sure it extends into the magazine well. And while we're at it, let me also connect these vertex points here. And now let's just delete that edge for the moment, because otherwise it's gonna add into our Boolean once we do the Boolean action, and we have more to clean up. So let's make a difference here. And then we still have our Boolean modifier active. We didn't collapse it yet. Let me actually make that a little bit more narrow, 15 millimeters instead of 16. So we have to compare it here with our reference. And let's put it at 15.5. Let's do it as the perfect middle ground. So let's apply our Boolean. And you can see we have some issue there. So let's undo. That gives us back the Boolean operator, and I'm gonna put it to exact. So now if I apply, you can see that it actually also gives us these faces there, which we're missing. However, that caused some issues here, because the exact Boolean often produces some double faces. So I'm just gonna get rid of the entire upper faces and just fill it all back again. And that way we make sure that everything is perfectly where it should be. So then in the back view, let's delete the right side again. We're gonna put our mirror back on in just a moment. But first, let's do some vertex connections here. Let's also connect this here. And on the other side. Let me just have a quick look around here if we forgot anything for now, but I think this is looking good. Let's put the mirror back on. And as you remember, earlier we changed the right side orthographic view to make it easier to work there on that upper piece on the left. But now it's time to take that back. All we have to do is use the green arrow here on our gizmo on the Z-axis and just push it back down. Let's take a look here together with our X-ray view to make sure this is all aligned. And that looks good. So now we can focus on this piece that is extending out there on the magazine well. And we are gonna start with a cylinder on that. I'm gonna have 24 sides for it. Radius 4.5, depth 50 millimeter for now, and let's rotate it on the x-axis, 90 degree. I'm gonna disable our snap, and instead what I'm gonna do to position that, I'm gonna slice it here. No, actually, I'm just gonna connect it. And now we're gonna copy the coordinate from that face on the x-axis and paste it back onto our object here in object mode. So let's take that over here to our edit mode. And then we can drag these vertices out a bit accordingly to our concept, or reference, I should say. Let's put that around there. And then in face mode, we're gonna extrude it out here to the left. And also sort of like have both of these edges there sort of in the center from where we see this extra bevel there, where it's connected. So let me just position it like that. So as the next thing, I'm just gonna demonstrate to you why we're gonna have to add a cross section. So you don't have to follow, but if we would extrude it like that, which I'm gonna undo, we get these hard edges there. Instead, what we're gonna do is add a cross section in there. Let's add an edge loop there in the center, and using our knife tool, we are gonna make a straight cut over here and then down again. Press enter, make sure it's accurate. And now with that selection, we can then do that extrusion, and we actually also retain this cylindrical shape that we want to have. So this is a great basis here. And we can do the exact same thing here as well for the smaller part there that is also extending to the left. Let's make 2 extrusions down. And somehow that didn't work with a Super Smart Create. Let me do that again. Sometimes I noticed you have to do it twice with the Super Smart Create. The first edge loop is sometimes messing up. It's a little bit buggy. So in that case, you have to press Ctrl Z or undo and just do it again. And the second time it will add a perfect edge loop. I guess there's a bug somewhere in there. Either way, same thing here as we just did before. Extrude, snap back, and drag out here to the left. And we can already optimize. These edges here, we don't really need. So we're gonna get rid of it. And let's just get rid here of the left side, including these faces there at the back. So that makes it easier to work with here, as long as this here is still blockout stages. And now it's time for a bevel. And you can see that this caused a problem doing it that way. So instead, we're only gonna do it on that selection here. So we don't produce this pinch there that we had before. And I'm gonna be generous here on that element. Gonna have 5 segments for it. This is quite a bit in the player's face, so I want to make sure to have this pretty high poly considering its size. And then let's just connect that over here horizontally. So that one I'm going to connect like that. And let's take a look here at this part where we also have to make a bevel. Let's just bring that up a bit first. And then same as before, we deselect this edge. And we can make a nice bevel here I'm also gonna give it 5 segments. And same as before, let's optimize that. And that means we're also gonna just connect these vertex points here. We can use the knife tool or we can use Super Smart Create. And that way we have this all nice and clean here. And that I'm gonna connect like this using our Super Smart Create. I'm gonna add one edge loop there in the center where I can connect it to. Same as we have there at the top. And now we need to take this face here, push it out a bit, and then we can just give it a bevel. Let me just do that again here. Let's bevel it like that, and let's take a look here where we still have a lot of vertices. We're just gonna collapse that down in the center. So this is looking good. Let's take a look as well here. So let's flatten that. And I'm going to delete these edges, or dissolve, I should say. And right now, this is looking a little bit too much like a pinch there. So I'm gonna take these edges here like that and just manually push them in like that. Let me also take these edges, and then we can do it a bit further just with these. And let's take these vertex points here individually and we drag them a bit further out again so that this looks more like one flow. And this one, let's put it back to the left a bit. So once again, we make sure we have a nice edge flow here. And now on this element, same as we did above, let's bevel that. Let's take this element here and collapse, and that vertex, while being in local transform, we put it to 0 on X so that this is back in place where it's supposed to be, aligned with the other ones. And now we have this element here left. Let's drag that a bit further up, extrude down. And instead of doing the bevel that we were just doing before, we need to look at it here on our reference image. And this one is based on a blueprint, so we know it's 100% accurate. And then we can simply go over here and make another knife loop. Otherwise, it's a bit hard to get that in there. Clean that up a bit. And now I'm gonna take these vertex together with the ones there at the top, quick lattice from interactive tools, and let's take it like that. Position it a bit down. And you can see that it's looking pretty nicely. So let's go over to the modifiers, and we can then collapse our lattice, and we can delete this piece here. And for now, we're just gonna leave it like that. We're not gonna boolean it yet. And let's bring up our reference image. We are gonna already start working on our upper receiver, because it's better to work on these receivers a little bit parallel to each other. We don't need to finish the lower 100%. It is actually easier if we already also establish a base for the upper. So let's take these vertex points here. And let's straighten that. S, Z, and O. We just want to make sure that we have a perfectly planar base there. Put our focus here on this cylindrical element. And what's important to point out is that we need to be a little bit flexible figuring out that diameter. But we do know that this element here is 16 millimeters in its width, the one from the Picatinny. And here I measured 15.8 for a radius, and that one is 16 once again. So that is that piece here, the base for the Picatinny, and we're just gonna extend it out. And now what we're gonna do is extrude out some extra edge here. Let's keep it basic for now. We're gonna go to our castle nut, copy the selection from that, separate that out, and essentially that is already perfectly aligned where we need it. And we are gonna make use of that here. Keep it as it is for now, the same size as the castle nut. Now pay attention to where our mouse cursor is, okay? And you can see that it's a bit too big. So we have to toggle a bit here in between our X-ray mode and the solid mode and pay attention to where this is intersecting. As pointed out here by that circle, you don't need to copy my properties yet. You can do that later if you want. But that looks about right for the moment. I'm gonna give it a little bit more scaling later, so you can wait before you copy my properties if you want to have exactly the same dimensions that I have. So give it a moment. Meanwhile, what we want to do here is carry on that side, and that needs a little bit more of a better edge flow here, to be precise. So when it comes to our receiver, both the lower and the upper, especially in the beginning where we are still in that early blockout stage pretty much, we have to be flexible with it. And that's why it might appear like we are working on different things at the same time. But that's just how it has to be sometimes. We are blocking out now. So I'm gonna go back here to this reference again that we had before for the same reason as before, because it's just better to have a look here at this segment. So I'm gonna take this and extrude that out, which will then be a part of our upper receiver actually. We can use the scale here on the x-axis, and that way we can further define that shape there, which didn't have enough curve before. So let's just already take these vertex points here and position them also accordingly to our reference. I'm gonna go back here to that cylinder and scale it a little bit further down. And I would recommend that you can now, if you want, copy these values here in the Transform tab so that we're on the same page going forward. So we didn't do the Boolean yet because we had to remain flexible that way to make sure that this here is as proportional as it can be towards the other elements from our lower receiver. And now we can take that cylinder and in vertex mode, we will simply follow along here with the shape that we already have created there and that we also see on the reference. So I'm just deselecting one vertex each and then push the other ones over. In that case, it wouldn't work to use lattice or something like that. We just have to do that manually. So far that cylinder is not joined yet onto our receiver, but we're gonna have to do that. So let's take it and remove the entire modifier stack that was carrying over from the castle nut, and we don't actually need that. So I'm gonna delete the right side and then take the cylinder and the receiver and press Ctrl J. So now we have that joined together, but we need to properly attach it. And we can start here by selecting these edges and simply filling it. We fill the space. So let's just do that manually here, step by step. And now at this segment here, the next one, we want to take two edges on the left side, and then we carry on here with just one. And this is all looking a bit rough around the edges, literally right now, but we're gonna make sure it's perfect later on. I am going to get rid of the crease, which was carrying over from the castle nut. And next, let's remember that the x coordinate here is 11.45 for that face. So what we're gonna do now is take these two edges here, left and right, make a subdivision. And now with our edge slide, we're gonna put it down to 11.45 as well. So pay attention to the upper right and press Shift until we are at 11.45 there at the upper right. And now we are. That means that this is exactly at the same spot now on the x coordinate. And we can then delete these faces, which we don't need. Let's get rid of that. And now we're getting closer here to connecting that, but we're simply gonna remove that face that we had there. And we will then take the other face and do a fill on it. So now we can put our attention here to this segment. Let's take that vertex and then let's go back here to our vertex slide. And that way we remain that edge flow that we have put there before by just sliding it on that edge. Sometimes it's a bit tricky. If it jumps out of place like now, just Ctrl Z and do again. You can press Shift to make that more slow. And let's also take these edges here, 1, 2, 3. And let's press SX0 to make sure it's perfectly straight. And then we're gonna put in 11.45 so that this is all perfectly aligned there. So earlier we connected two edges here against one, which leaves us there with something that we can rearrange. I'm just gonna get rid of some edges and reconnect. And for that part, let's use the knife tool and just cut out a bit there, that shape. And also here, let me just reconnect that so that everything is properly welded already. And then dissolve. And now this is looking pretty good for a blockout. Let's copy the y coordinate on that vertex, make a selection for this vertex, and paste this so that this is all aligned. And here I'm making use of this plugin that we installed to make that a bit more fast here with the connection up. Let's take a quick look at the reference, and we have these two pieces there that are extending out, and on the right side we have these two pieces. So just a quick look here at all these elements which are still a part of our upper receiver, and in some cases here also the lower. And let's just start with this piece here. Gonna put that to a 16 millimeters. And we have to remember that this is actually the left side, even though we work on it in the right orthographic view, to make it easier for us as long as we didn't collapse our mirror yet. But that means we have to push it over here to the right side. And we are going to add a bevel modifier on that cube. Let's put that to a 1 millimeter offset, and 3 segments should be enough for that. So this is making it then easy for us to just have that piece. That's basically just a box with a bevel on it. And we can then just copy that element and already do the same thing here for that upper piece. And I'm gonna put it to maybe 25. That looks about right, but maybe 26 would be better actually. And the offset, we have to make it more wide. And also I want to have at least 4 segments here for it. But let me just get rid of that bevel once more, because we want to put a rotation and scale on it. Control and A, rotation and scale. And now if we put the bevel back on, you will see that the corners are actually nice and round. Before that we had a scale on there. And that's why we had to reset the transform on it. Gonna have it actually at 5 segments. We're gonna position that correctly later. Don't worry if you're not sure if you put it at the right place. We're gonna take care of that. So let's go back here and extrude that further out on that cylinder. Gonna put that mirror back on. And we are jumping once again from one to the other. We are back here on that element, which is basically the block out for our upper Picatinny rail. Let's just drag that over here. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're gonna weld that all later. This is just a block out for now. I'm just gonna make a copy here actually of that reference once more. Take that into isolation here with the receiver. And now with just the reference selected, there is one part that I want to position it towards, which is another blueprint that I found, and that is extremely useful for our further silhouette here to make sure that this is all 100%. So just make sure you have it aligned there as good as you can. The reference, you can also see my coordinates before. And now with that, we can then actually position that here properly. And I'm just gonna give it 3 segments. 4 was a bit overkill. So now that is nicely positioned, and we have yet another piece that we also should block out already. Let's just copy the piece that we have just created. I'm gonna put quick origin on that so that we have that centered, or you can press Q. Well, if you're using my shortcuts, you can press Q. That's what I meant. So we know that this is 3.18 centimeters there. The distance between that element and basically half of the receiver. So now we have a box with that dimension. We are gonna put the quick origin here on that side. And now if we put that to 0, we know exactly that this is 3.18 0.18 centimeters, and we can then just take that box and position it here within that bigger box, at least for the outside, okay? The bigger box is just for reference. What matters is the small one here that has the bevel modifier on it. Let's go over to vertex mode, and then we can already block that out perfectly, at least here from our front view. So this piece here, let's just push it to the side. We are not actually using that. This is just for reference. And we are gonna take that reference here just on the green gizmo handle, okay? As before, we're gonna put it back so that we actually see that also in the side view, that piece that we just blocked out. Just make sure that these edges are lined up there if you look at it in X-ray. And now we can already position that here where this is supposed to be. I'm going over here and take that whole face and drag it further into the cylinder. And now with the edge there in the back, I'm just going to bring that up like that. Yeah, this is a proper blockout right now. And absolutely crucial. So let's just keep it easy for the time being. Not too many bevels or anything. And now we can add a vertex here on the right side with Super Smart Create. And then on the blue handle from our gizmo, let's bring that up. Connect over here. And this one, we want to go right there where it's intersecting. So now let's also push that over here to that side. And it helps to go between X-ray and solid mode to see where we are having our intersections. But I want to make that more easy for us. So what I'm gonna do is head over here to our reference. And I'm going to just disable the opacity for now, which means that our reference is fully opaque. And here within that menu, I'm going to decrease a bit the X-ray opacity. And that helps us now to actually really see the intersections that we have here. If you see this gray outline there, this is where the actual intersection is at. And that helps tremendously to see here as we are blocking out particularly that piece here. Let's re-enable our bevel modifier that's still on there. And the segments are a bit much here. I'm going to put that down to 2. Quick look at it here also from the back view once again. I'm gonna push that a little bit further out here. Remember, we have this 3D reference, which we can now delete. We established that proportion now. And let me grab the reference image. I want to show you this piece here, which is exactly that piece here, yeah? So this is perfectly planar, and that is what we can just do with the box. Let's put it to 40, just for the time being. Let's take our vertex points and drag that over there, okay? And on that side, we're gonna have it around there. And let's go over to our back view. But I also want to select the reference and disable the opacity for now, so that it's opaque and we see the intersections. Let's rotate that. If you press Control, it rotates in 5-degree steps. And I actually want that to be -22 so that this is properly aligned here with what we can see on our reference image. So speaking of reference, I just wanted to be clear that this here, as you can see, is almost seamless going into that cylindrical shape. So that needs to be taken into account here. Once again, this is just a blockout, obviously, but we have to position it in a way where this is coming all together once we do our Boolean. So I'm gonna select this vertex, which is the 9th vertex as counted from the top. And we want to enable our snapping. And then snap it like that. That should end up looking exactly like that, all right? So now if we position it like that here, it's properly aligned there with that cylinder like we were just witnessing there on the reference image. And this is just another blockout. And while we're at it, this is where the forward assist is going into, and that is yet another piece that I want to already block out. This turned way into a UpperReceiver blockout session. So let's carry on with it. Gonna have a cylinder of 7mm radius. Rotate that on the x-axis 90°. And 32 sides, as well as a depth of 50mm. And now let me put the dimensions here actually to 15 and 15 for X and Y, so that seems to fit perfectly. And just for the moment here, you can see we have this reference here, and it says 20-degree angle. I was also able to find that information. So aligning it here, you will see that that seems to be the case with 20°. So let's push that further out. And then we can go over here to the global orientation mode. And that way we can just use our gizmo like that and drag it back to where we actually want it to be. And once again, here we see really nicely our intersection. And let's bring that further out a bit. We have a lot of rotating around to do. I hope you didn't have a headache yet. So I'm starting to think that would be better with 19. So that this actually intersects there where we want it to be, and it looks great from the side and here from the back view. So that matters more than the other one that we had there from the top. This here looks like this fits perfectly with the rest of what we have. And that's what I meant with the flexibility that we need to keep here on these references. I'm gonna make a connection here through the center. And then let's take these faces, and I will also take that face here. And I will then extrude that over. But before we do that, let's change the orientation back to default mode. And now we can really push it here into that direction. I extruded, snapped back, and pushed it out like that. And with that selection still active, let's scale that up here. Just using our green handle of the gizmo. And comparing it with our reference, it seems we are certainly on a good way here with that. Let me push that over a bit here. And then back on the other element here, that we were just working on. Let's take it and select the front faces. And we are in our default orientation mode. Let's just drag that out a bit further here. Let's put it around these edges, sort of there where we're gonna align it better later, but that should be okay for now. Let's just leave it at that. Later we're gonna come back to it. But let's take a look at our Picatinny. I'm gonna switch over to the back view, locate this reference, that part of the reference here, the Picatinny. We're gonna have a box with 21.2 millimeters, which is the total width of the Picatinny. And let's just position that here like so. Now we know that this is 9.32 here on the z-axis. Let's also enter that. And let's position it like this here. I'm gonna make a copy of that. And that copy I'm gonna put to 15.67 according to our reference information. And let me select that copy and then drag it down. Go back to the original piece, and we want to connect these edges here with the edge loop, and then zoom in and position it precisely with Shift exactly there to the box, which we can now delete, the copied box. So now we know that this is 45-degree angle. And we are gonna add another cube here. Let's just put that to 6 millimeter. You're gonna see why in a moment. I rotate that 45 degree while pressing Control. You can do that easily. On the Y-axis, enable snap to vertex and snap it right there. So now we can take that and simply push it over here like that, so that this is perfectly in place there with that vertex right there, okay? And that is pretty much already half of the work. We're gonna make another edge loop here. And let's just drag that down once again so that it connects right there where we just put that. And now we can actually get rid of that cube. That was just a helper object. What we can do now is make an edge loop here in the center. And we are just gonna remove that edge here, dissolve actually. And in vertex mode, connect it over here like that. And then let's just get rid of the faces that we don't need. We can then fill that, make use of our plugin or use the fill and connect. Lots of ways to do that. And that is how we established already the main shape here. I'm gonna put a mirror on that. And on the mirror, we wanna put it to bisect and flip on X. So let's collapse that because it's one chunk. And we can then cut it in half again. And now if we put the mirror back, we can actually toggle it on and off as opposed to before where it was one piece. So let's take a look at the side view. This one is important, 3 millimeter, okay? Well, they are all important, but let's remember the 3 millimeter for the next step. And also this here is actually beveled. So let's have a cube and let's put that to these 3 millimeter that we just looked at. And that element, we still have vertex snap on. I'm just gonna snap it like that here. So we saw in the side view that this is having some cut out shape there with a height of 3 millimeter. And this is gonna be our Boolean operator for that. Meanwhile, let's take this edge loop And I want to be generous with it. I'm gonna give it not 1, not 2, but 3 segments. All right, 3 segments. So for that step, we put that box with 3 millimeter. And now we can actually see at the bottom edge where this is going. So we can delete it safely because now we know how to proceed here on the side view with it. I know that might sound a bit confusing. It's a bit hard to explain, but you're gonna see it right now. Once we put that here to a 10 for this piece there, as seen on the reference. And now let's just make a copy and put that to 5.25 on the Y. And then with a snap on, we can snap that here to the side. And we will then make an edge loop here in the center and snap it to the edge right next to it here. So that means we can now delete that copied element. So we're left with only one once again. And then we can remember these 3 millimeters on the reference here and just delete all these faces here. And that leaves us with the perfect shape of the Picatinny, or at least one module for it. Just gonna make use of the F2 plugin, and this here I'm gonna fill. And we are gonna carry on in the next hour. I know that was a lot of intake here in that episode.